Well, hello and welcome to the Econobox garage. I'm glad you could join me. The plan for this week is to get the fuel tank in and finish running all the fuel lines. So don't go away, I'll be right back. Welcome back to the garage. In last week's episode, you'll have seen I've got all the taillights installed on the back, the license plate light, and the license plate mounting all figured out. This week I'm going to continue working on the back of the car, but the focus is going to be underneath. And first off is installing the gas tank. Now, this is the original that came off the car. It's been sitting empty for so long, I didn't want to take any chances, so I have bought a new one, and I've also bought a new sender, so I'll show you that. So here's the new tank, which I picked up from eBay quite some time ago, and I've given it a coat of rust paint. I've also purchased a fuel sender kit from Bugeye Guys, and I'll put a link to this in the description below. They highly recommend and include on their kit a brass float. The usual plastic ones are not very tolerant to ethanol, whereas the brass ones are. Another thing they've done to upgrade is replaced the cork gasket that is normally used with the Viton rubber gasket. So there's that one there, and there's one underneath the top plate here. Now another item that you need for installing the fuel tank is this gasket here, and that goes over the top, slides down to here, and this provides a seal for where the filler tube comes through the floor of the boot and into the car. And there's another grommet on the back of the car where this part comes through, and then the gas cap goes on here. Now I'll get the sender installed in the tank, and then we can start to get underneath the car. Another important thing with the sender is to get the float oriented correctly. So I'm just going to place the gasket over the holes like so. Now this is the front of the tank, and this is the back of the tank. The sender itself goes in the tank towards the back, and another way to check that is the electrical connection here points towards the front of the car. So we'll just maneuver that into the tank like so. Okay, so now that I've got the gasket lined up and the sender unit itself, there's 6 screws to install that whole thing. Now, to install the tank, there are 6 holes. There's 2 on each side, there and there, and then 1 on the front edge and 1 on the back edge. Now the gaskets for those, there's a rubber gasket spacer that goes on each side. Get this one out. One of those for each side. And then there's a single one. There's a single one for each of the ones at the front and one at the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide those over the studs that are on the boot floor and hopefully hold those up. The other thing I'll need to do is run the wire from the sender to the plug or to the connector in the harness as it comes through the boot floor at the back of the car. All right, I think I've got the tank ready to put in now. I've got the underfloor seal in place. The sender is all attached down. I have the gaskets for each one. And then I've got some new nuts. I cleaned up the old washers because I don't have the right size. And new lock washers because there wasn't any on there actually when I did take the old tank out. So all I've got to get ready now is the wire that goes from the sender to the harness, And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take this spade connector off, and on the end of the wire, and this is the wire I'm using here, I've already got one of the bullet connectors on the other one end, and then I'll just put a ring connector on this end here. But before I put the spade connector on the end, I'm going to adjust the length of the wire so I don't have a lot of extra coming across the top of the tank and having to wind around. Okay, here we are underneath the car, and here's one of the bolts or studs for the gas tank. There's another one right there. There's one right here. It's kind of hard to see in this light. There's the fourth one, and then the other two are there and there. Now before I go any further, I've just got a 5/16 UNF tap on here, and I'm going to clean those threads up. And then here you can see where the wire comes through for this fuel sender. That's this wire here. And as I mentioned several times, I also had a wire for an electric fuel pump installed in the harness when I ordered it from AutoSparks. So they put that in for me, so that'll run across the top of the tank, over the arch under there, and then over to the electric fuel pump, which is mounted on the bulkhead just behind the seats. I'm not worried about that just yet. I'm just going to get these threads cleaned up, then we can get to work on actually putting the tank under the car. Well, I've got the threads all cleaned off underneath on those studs. Next thing I need to do is figure out how long I need to make this wire. Now, while I was underneath there, I measured from where the wire comes through the floor to this bolt here, and that's about 8 inches. And then from this bolt to here is about 12. So to give myself some wiggle room, make it 21 inches long and put the ring connector on, and then we can get to putting this in the car. Okay, I've got my wire cut to length. I've got a good solid crimp on this ring terminal here, and I've tightened up the nut. So that's in really good, that's a good solid connection here. And it goes off to the left side of the car, because this is about the center line of the car right here, and that's where that will come out. Now there is a clip on the underside of the boot floor that I'll show you in a minute where this clips in. So I think we're just about ready to get back under the car and put the gas tank in. Now here's where the fuel filler neck comes up through the body, and if I can get this down through there, you can see the hole in the floor where it comes through. So part of the challenge of getting this into place is getting the fuel tank onto those 6 studs, and then get the fuel filler neck to line up with this grommet here. Well, here we are. There's the wires coming through the floor. Right here, I put a grommet in to protect the wires, and I don't want to plug that hole because it does act as a bit of a drain hole for any moisture, any water that gets into the boot cavity. So here's one of the clips for the wire, and you can see the threads are all cleaned up on all 6. So now I'm ready to put the tank in. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is put these, shoot, they're not going to stay up there. Let's see if these ones do. Okay, the side ones are going to stay up. That's good. So put those ones on. So the gaskets for the sides, I guess they're not really a gasket, they're more of a pad. Let's see. I have to see if we can What I might do is just use a little bit of double-sided tape on the tank or on these to get them to stick. So I'll be right back. Okay, so what I've done on these is I just put a roll of masking tape on there, and hopefully that'll just help hold them in place. And then before I tighten the tank up, I can just pull that tape out from there. Oh, there we go. Okay, so far so good. I'm just going to lay this wire up like that, because that goes right across the top of the tank. And now, time to get this in. There I have the fuel tank in now. So there's the nuts on the one side, across the front. The wire for the fuel pump is not pinched, and the wire for the fuel sender is not pinched. And then there you can see the connection, the bullet connector on the harness end. That'll go to the connector on the wire here. And we'll get up top. And there's the gas tank coming, or the filler neck coming through the body. So I'll go get the cap and throw that on there. Now, I recently did a poll on my community tab regarding the gas cap. This is the chrome one. So that was one option. And the other option was the body colored one. Now, the votes that came in, about 2/3 were in favor of the body color and 1/3 in favor of the chrome. And that kind of reinforced the way I was leaning, and I've decided to go with the body color one for now. So there we have the fuel tank installed. There's still a couple of things I need to do. I need to hook up the fuel line from the tank to the pump and wire up the pump. Well, there you can see the fuel filler hook neck going from the floor and up through the grommet in the rear deck. Now you can just see the white seal that goes between the top of the tank and the underside of the floor there. Now here's the fuel pipe that runs from the tank to the fuel pump. This is the end that goes into the tank. It's just got a rubber stopper on it right now. I'll get that off. And I will have to bend it to the proper shape, much like I did with the brake lines, and I have the tool to do that. Well, here you can see the fuel line coming out of the tank and then up and over the wheel arch, and you can just see the one tab right about there. So that'll get clipped into that one. And then there's another one, it's hard to see, right in here, so that'll get clipped in there as well. And then I just have to make some adjustments on the fuel line. There's the fuel barb on the fuel pump, and then there's where I've got the hose bent right now. So I'm just going to put a bend right up in here to come more or less straight down into the fitting on the tank. Okay, you can see here I have the pipe in the clips here, and then the other one just off picture here. And so I've terminated the pipe here. There's the barb on the fuel pump itself. So I'm just going to cut some fuel hose to join the two up, put a couple of clamps on it, and then this end of the fuel system is done. So there we have the fuel line, the fuel hose hooked between the fuel pump itself and the line coming from the fuel tank. So that's all the hoses and that at this end of the fuel system. I still have wires to hook up, but I'll do that in the next video. Well, now that I have the hoses hooked up at the back of the car, I just have to finish up hooking the ones up at the front of the car. So the fuel line comes across the front or down the side here. Kind of hard to see. Across and underneath the radiator support, and then up into this space here, and then I have a rubber hose attached. And you just see the glint of the, you can just see the hose clamp down there. So the hose comes up and into there. Now the only thing missing is a fuel filter. So I've just picked up a generic one from a local supplier with a 1/4-inch inlet and outlet. And the important thing with these filters is to make sure you get them in oriented correctly. So you can see on the bottom of this one here, it has the word in. There we go, in. So that goes towards the fuel tank. So that'll go into this in this way. So I'm just going to cut out a section of this hose here and insert the fuel filter in line. Well, there we have the fuel filter installed, and it's the hose itself is kind of out of the way of anything moving. This is the steering shaft right here, just a short length up into the carbs. Now I believe this outlet here and this one here are strictly a vent for the float bowls. So I'm going to figure out something to that to get it to vent away from the car. I guess it has to go down to the ground somehow. These velocity stacks are from Q1 Classic Engineering in San Antonio, and I'll put a link down below. I'll put a link to these in the description below, or at least to his website. Now that all the lines are hooked up, I'm going to leave this part of the car for now, and there's still some stuff at the back that I want to look after, but that will be in the next episode. Well, that does it for this episode. Thanks for joining me. In the next video, the plan is to finish up the work on the back. I'll finish off the wiring to the fuel pump, get the Sprite emblem on, get the rear bumpers on, and the muffler on the back. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to share it with your friends. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon. Click on that and you'll get notified when the next video comes out. My name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.